Welcome to another edition of Arundel Gridiron Review. Pete Medhurst is on his way to Liberty right now to broadcast the Navy basketball game, so I'm going to fill in handling the Pete role as host, if you will. And I've got with me my colleague from the Capital Gazette newspapers, Bob Hoke, who's a high school sports editor of the Capital, and he's got the expertise on high school football, so he's a better analyst than I am anyway when it comes to talking high school football. Bob, let's just jump right into it. We had 3 playoff games last weekend. Let's start with the game you covered on Friday night. Old Mill defeated Meade 19-6. Karan Tall, tailback, had a big game. Kind of a defensive struggle. Meade defense played very, very well to hold a high-powered Meade team to just 6 points. It's pretty impressive. Kind of tell us a little bit about the game, how it unfolded, and what Meade did to win.
Old Mill won.
Old Mill.
This was a 6-0 game, midway through the fourth quarter, so the game was still in question all the way until the end. A couple turnovers early from Meade. Neither offense was really moving the ball all that much. If you look at the overall numbers, Old Mill did run the ball fairly well. It wasn't gaudy numbers, wasn't 300 yards or anything like that.
Right.
Chewed up a lot of clock, but more importantly, just played really good defense. I mean, if you've seen Meade this year, they have a talented quarterback, some talented wide receivers. They've scored a lot of points on people, especially these last 7 or 8 weeks. So Old Mill's defense, the secondary played very well. Meade had a couple close calls, maybe a couple drop passes toward in the end zone, but ultimately just came down to the Old Mill. It's that old playoff staple: run the ball, play good defense.
Right.
Joey Graves actually started running the ball early for Old Mill. I don't know if he got hurt, banged up a little bit, but Karan Tall ended up getting a bulk of the carries. 3 short touchdown runs, so it wasn't anything flashy that they did.
Right.
But they eventually, nursing that 6-0 lead into the fourth quarter. Miles Fulton, quarterback, he only threw or completed rather 4 or 5 passes. Still had about 75, 80 yards. So when you're running the ball that well, it does open it up, for play action. He actually caught a pass on one of their last scoring drives.
The quarterback did?
It was 3rd and 7. He caught an 8-yard pass, so it wasn't anything terribly flashy. Just one of those, halfback option through to the quarterback. That led to the touchdown. I put them up, by 2 scores. But the bigger story really was the way that Old Mill's defense played. I mean, like we said before, Meade has put up some numbers this year, so to hold them, basically to nothing until the last minute or 2 of the game was real impressive for Old Mill.
Well, that's why I saw Coach Chad McCormick, Old Mill head coach, said that he considers Meade as what he called home run hitters, guys that can take it to the house at any time. Was Mike Francis, the head coach of Meade, a little surprised that they didn't break 1 or 2 plays?
I don't know if he was really surprised. I think they left some points, out there. Like I said, with maybe a couple drop passes. The early turnovers didn't hurt. Didn't help either. But yeah, I've seen them 2 or 3 times this year, and each time I've seen them, they scored in the 20s and 30s.
Right.
And we've seen Old Mill. It's funny. Old Mill lost that first game of the year to Douglas. A pretty good football team.
A darn good football
They
team.
gave up 30-some points, I think it was. And then if you look at their numbers the rest of the year, that includes, for a while they were, shutting down, if you want to call it that, Arundel. Arundel scored some late touchdowns to get back in that game. They played well against Broadneck, obviously struggled, against South River, but they're playing really good defense right now, and they're going to need to play some good defense coming up this week.
All right, well, let's just wrap up Meade, a fantastic season. First-year head coach Mike Francis and his staff did a tremendous job improving the program across the board, doing some other good things in the community. We've talked about that on this show all season. Let's look ahead at Old Mill's next game. They move into the state quarterfinals. They're going to be playing Parkville at Perry Hall. Parkville's an undefeated team, but Baltimore County, not the greatest football. So I think Old Mill has a chance here. Why don't you handicap that game, break it down a little bit for us, Bob?
Yeah, if you look at the 2 teams, Old Mill, we were so used to them being in the playoffs every year, even under the previous format where you had to be the top 4 in your region. And here they are the last 2 years not making the playoffs. And, when it's a team like Old Mill not in the playoffs for 2 straight years, it is a big deal. I think it's important to note, I think I mentioned this with Pete a few weeks ago, they would have been in this year even under the old format.
Right.
So there's no asterisk beside their name or anything like that. But so they have more of the playoff experience, maybe not all the players, but Chad McCormick's been there 16 or 17 years. He's used to being in the playoffs. He's used to coaching in big games. Then you look at a team like Parkville. Yeah, they are undefeated. The competition. Who knows what it's like up in Baltimore County.
Right.
They haven't been in the playoffs since I believe it was the early 2000s. They had a stretch where they were in 3 straight years. And I was just looking the other day, so the playoff games they've won this year, it's actually the first 2 playoff games they've won in school history. So,
wow.
Experience on the side of Meade and the coaching staff, maybe even a few of the players. If you're a senior on Old Mill, you might have played in a playoff game a few years ago. So it's going to be a tough game. I mean, obviously, they're going on the road, even though it's a neutral site, but it is closer to Parkville. They're playing an undefeated team. Parkville does not give up a lot of points. They've given up less than 100 points. 4 or 5 shutouts on the season. So, but if Old Mill is able to run the ball, control the clock, play good defense, so it might be one of those 17-14 games. For all I know, who watch it'll be 30-28.
Yeah. Well, we want it to be Old Mill, run the ball, control the clock, 17-14, because it's a 7 o'clock start up in Baltimore County, and we want to get that article in the paper. And if it's a high-scoring, crazy game, we may not.
Right.
Let's look at our other public school game that was held last weekend. Arundel, South River, the undefeated team, class of Anne Arundel County all season. This has been happening, it seems like, every year. The best team in the county, the team that goes undefeated during the regular season, gets knocked off in the playoffs, and that's what happened again here. Arundel, in a wild one, 47-34 over South River. Quarterback Austin Sly, another outstanding game for Austin. 15 for 23 for 254 yards and 2 touchdowns. Standout running back Jordan Andrews, another big game. Catherine Fominique covered this game, but what did you see happening here? I mean, South River, I did notice a quote from Coach Eddie Dolch from South River that they were somehow thin on the front line, on their offensive line. I guess they've lost some players, and he said he was starting a bunch of sophomores, even a freshman, and Arundel was able to get after them with some pressure. I guess David Faust was under duress. But if you talked to Catherine or just from editing the story, what was your thoughts on what happened out there?
What I like about what Arundel did was this is a game where they were down in the fourth, down by a point in the fourth quarter. It's like one of those back and forth games. South River had the lead, and sure, they might have been thin on the offensive line. They still scored 34 points.
Yeah, right.
I think one of their scores might have been defensive though. But Austin Sly hits Petey Tucker for a late touchdown, puts them ahead. They get a stop. And then Jordan Andrews basically sealed the win with a touchdown run. It's funny, I covered that game earlier this year. It was week 4. And if you recall, Austin Sly got hurt in week 1 against North Point.
He was not available for that.
Well, he missed the next 2 games. The first game back was against South River. He was still wearing a brace. And you can just tell the first quarter or so, he just wasn't into his rhythm yet. We got into a rhythm, put up some pretty good numbers in that game. They only lost by 8 points. If you look at South River's games all year, that was one of the closest games they've had outside of the game they beat Broadneck by 7 points. So I don't know if anybody was going into this game, predicting Arundel was going to win, but it wasn't that far-fetched to think that a team like Arundel wouldn't go into South River and pull off the upset. We talk about it. It's almost every year. We've seen it the last few years with Broadneck. I think it happened to Old Mill. If you're the number 1 seed in the Class 4A East region, a little bit different this year because there really isn't a true region final.
Right.
But that number 1 team, even undefeated teams, we've seen get knocked out in some cases by a team that it had beaten in the playoff, beaten in the regular season. So that's 2 straight years. Last year, ironically, was South River beating Broadneck, and then this year it's with Arundel beating South River. I just like the way that they came back. It wasn't a huge deficit, but if you're down in the fourth quarter and you come back and win,
right, on the road, they're on the
road, shows a lot about the team, and we'll see how they can fare this week against a really tough Quince Orchard team.
Well, just wrapping up, it is a great season for Coach Eddie Dolch in South River, and it's a tough way to go. Finish when you're undefeated. I guess what were they 11-0 then at that point?
I guess they would have been 10-0, so 10-1.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So great season for South River. Loss to Arundel doesn't tarnish a fantastic season for them and in the Edgewater School. But Arundel, one thing I thought about it is South River has been outscoring opponents all year. Nobody's really been able to keep pace with them. I haven't looked at the numbers, but you mentioned, 47 points.
Right.
You're not going to beat anybody giving up 47 points. Has defense, was that a weakness of South River we didn't notice all season? Have they been allowing big numbers but just outscoring people?
Well, it's tough to say because if you look at a lot of their games, they're up big. So who knows in the fourth quarter, maybe they're subbing some guys in.
Right.
Teams are passing. Maybe they're playing a little bit of a softer defense when they have that 3 touchdown leads. It's really tough to say. A couple of times I've seen them, I thought the defense played very well. They really shut down Old Mill a few weeks ago. That game against Arundel early in the season, even though Sly did come on late in the game, to hold Arundel to 22 points, that's one of their lowest scoring outputs of the season. So it might have been an issue at times, but I think that it was masked by the fact that they were scoring so many points, and maybe we didn't notice if there were any holes in the defense. But a lot of people have given up 30 and 40 plus points to Arundel. So really no shame there. And like you said, just a great season for South River, a loaded senior class. And this is a senior class that if they would have been on the team as freshmen,
they only won one
this
game,
is a 1-9 football team. So just a gradual improvement. That's that's a testament to the kids just sticking with the program. And of course, Eddie Dolce and his staff. So just a fine season for South River. Regular season county champions. First undefeated regular season school history. So they did a lot of good things this year.
Right. And congratulations to Coach Jack Walsh and his staff at Arundel. And obviously they had a great game plan to put up 47 points on a very good South River team. Now let's move forward. State quarterfinal. Arundel will be going on the road. It's going to be a tough game, as you mentioned. Kind of break that one down for us, Bob.
Yeah. If you look at Quince Orchard, if you look at the each week when we get the state top 25, they're the top-ranked team in the Class 4A. They're in the top 5 in the state. So that includes teams like St. Francis, McDonough, DeMatha, Wise. So it's going to be a challenge. It's on the road. Quince Orchard's undefeated, kind of like Parkville. They have, if you look at their scoring margin, it's 500 and some to, I believe, less than 100. They also have 3 or 4 shutouts. They do play some Northwest. They beat some of those other talented Montgomery County schools.
Montgomery County is usually pretty tough football.
Absolutely. And talking to Jack Walsh these last couple of days, he did kind of made a comment that if you look across the board, offensive, defensive lines, Quince Orchard outweighs each one of the Arundel players, by about 40 or 50 pounds in some cases. So it is going to be tough, but a team like Arundel that can put up some points, but I guess the question is, are they going to be able to put up enough to keep it close against Quince Orchard? Go into that fourth quarter, have a chance.
Right.
Anything can happen then. You're dealing with high school kids here, but if you had to look before the season and said, who do you think would be your favorite to win a state championship at the 4A level, a lot of people probably would have said Quince Orchard, especially now that North Point is down to the 3A. So going into the game, Arundel's not going to be expected to win. They're not going to be the favorites. Sometimes, teams kind of, that's to their advantage.
Right. Well, before we finish with the public schools, I wanted to get your opinion on this new format, 9-game regular season, more teams making the playoffs. I mean, my sense was that the teams with poorer records that would not have been in the playoffs in the past lost, so they ended up playing 10 games anyway.
Right.
I guess there may have been a couple teams that may not have made the playoffs that did win a playoff game. Would Meade have been in the playoffs in the past format? They won like 7 games, 8?
Well, they won 8 games. They won 7 games in the regular season. So I believe they were one of the top 4 seeds because you had South River. The way it worked out in the 4A East, no upsets in the first round. So
South River, Old Mill, Arundel.
We had South River, Arundel, which was a 1 against 4. And then you had Meade, Old Mill, which was Old Mill, the number 2 seed, so Meade, the 3 seed. So they would have been in the playoffs either way.
Right.
Not a whole lot of, even when you look across the board. So in the 4A, across all 4 regions, the only upset we had was Arundel beating South River. So in just about every case, you had the 1 and 2 seeds advancing. So it's teams that at the end of the day, you expect those teams to move on. It does give a team that maybe finishes around 500, maybe a 5 or a 6 seed. I think on one of the other classifications, I think Wild Lake went in as a 2-17.
Really?
They pulled off an upset.
Really?
I believe at the 3A level. So, but if you look across the board, there were only really 2 or 3 upsets. When I say upsets, that could include a 3 beating a 2. So even games like that are that close. So the teams that are playing right now are the teams that people probably expected to be there at the end of the year. You're playing a minimum of 10 games if you're in the playoffs. You still have to win the same amount of games to win a state championship, but there's no longer that true region championship. I think what they're hoping for is to have your state semifinals, your state finals be truer. To where it used to be just a blind, not a blind draw, but you had the brackets. So if this year, East, West, and then North, South, it's just a matter of who you play. And so sometimes we would see a game in the state semifinals where we say, wow, that really could
have been a state final.
A state final. So I think you're going to have, the top teams are going to be there at the end. They're just going to get there a little bit of a different way. Right.
Well, that's what we should mention, that they reseeded after this latest round. Prior to state quarterfinals, they reseeded the entire tournament to just as Bob was speaking about. But wrapping up our high school segment, and we don't need to spend a lot of time on this one, MIAA B Conference Championship game, St. Mary's Pilati. I expected a great game. The regular season game was a pretty good game, and Pilati just put it on St. Mary's. Final score of 42-0. Saints couldn't even get a point. Amani Alford had a big game running the ball for Pilati, 82 yards, 3 touchdowns. Bob, what in the world happened there? Because I was shocked when I read your article, and St. Mary's been a very tough team all season. They played with Pilati during the regular season. I think Pilati was favored as the regular season champion in the league, but never did I expect St. Mary's to lose 42-0.
Yeah, and quite honestly, they really were never in the game. I mean, I think Pilati hit them with a big play, 3 or 4 plays in. St. Mary's first possession, they had a turnover. Pilati scored again. St. Mary's was punting from deep in their own territory. Errant snap, the punter went to get the ball. His knee was down, so that play's dead. It's ironic that, as I'm at the game, it was a 3 o'clock game. You were out in South Bend for a 2:30 Eastern Time Navy game, and the scores were 14-0, 21-0, 28-0. In fact, I think the St. Mary's athletic director even made a comment. We were both kind of following along, seeing how Navy was doing. But Pilati just extremely talented, and Jason Bedrone even said, look, that team is a lot more talented than we are. We would have to have played a perfect game to beat them. Yes, they were without Alex Wicks, your standout running back. He doesn't play defense,
right.
But maybe having him in there, maybe you're able to control the game a little bit more. And then also about Pilati, they are very young. Talking to the coach afterwards, only had 2 or 3 seniors, so look out for them next year.
This was their. Well, no, St. Mary's had been the 2-time B Conference champion.
Right.
So this Pilati, they're on the move.
And so St. Mary's beat Pilati last year in the championship game. So that's 3 straight years. So you look at the senior class for St. Mary's, 3 straight years in the championship game, 2 straight titles. I know it hurts right now, right after the game, but hopefully after a couple days, I'm sure they'll have some, end of season banquet. But it really should be something to celebrate that, the accomplishments that this team had. Just ran to a team that was just more talented than it was, and when you fall behind that early against a good team, you're not going to come back.
Well, we want to thank Bob for joining us and filling in for Pete Meadors. 2 weeks ago, Bob filled in for me with Pete, and I watched the show, and Bob did a fantastic job. And then I remembered that Bob is a graduate of the Maryland Broadcasting, what is it?
Broadcasting Institute of Maryland.
Right, so Bob's a pro. I mean, so I better worry about losing my job on the Gridiron Review as the analyst. Could be Pete and Bob next year. But we appreciate you filling in, Bob.
And real quick, Bill, I guess I should mention before we end the high school segment, so on Saturday we had the MIAA B Conference Championship. Later that night, the A Conference, Mount St. Joseph, which annually has a lot of Anne Arundel County kids on their team, coached by Rich Holzer, a county guy, former coach at Meade. They knocked off McDonough to win the A Conference.
And that was considered a bit of an upset.
Yeah, McDonough was undefeated. They'd beaten Mount St. Joseph during the regular season. So congratulations to Rich Holzer and all those county guys. I know he comes down here. He has ties to the county, so I know he's plucking kids away that will be going to Spalding, St. Mary's, ACS.
We've talked about that. I mean, they're definitely recruiting in Anne Arundel County with Rich Holzer's ties to Anne Arundel County. He was former Meade coach, we should mention. So absolutely, Mount St. Joseph's coming into Anne Arundel County to try to recruit players. And yes, congratulations. I'm glad you mentioned that. Mount St. Joseph, a great season for them, and Rich Holzer's done a fantastic job up there. All right, we'll come back and we'll talk a little about a youth football All-Pro Championships coming up this weekend. A lot of Anne Arundel County team is involved. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Sure thing.
And we'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Gridiron Review, talking to youth football. All of the Anne Arundel County teams that won county championships last week, 2 weekends ago, the AAYFA champions in both the American Conference and the National, they are allowed now to advance to what is called the All-Pro Championships. And this has evolved into, in essence, the state championships for youth football. I talked to Steve Mitchelltree. He's a leader within the AAYFA, and Steve is the Anne Arundel County representative to the All-Pro Championships, and he kind of gave me a little bit of the history. This will be the 5th annual All-Pro Championships, and Anne Arundel County has been sending teams every year. All of our county champions qualify, both Division I and Division II. And they started it with All Pro Team Sports. That's a uniform and apparel company. Got to give Mike Lataki, who is with All Pro Sports, a lot of credit. He's footing the bill for these championships. None of the teams that qualify have to pay an entry fee, which, there's been some tournaments in the past that require an entry fee. That was kind of the goal. They wanted teams to be able to participate without worrying about funding this. They already spent a lot of money all season on uniforms, etc. And then they now have I think there's 8 counties: Anne Arundel, Howard, Prince George's, Baltimore, the Eastern Shore, parts of the Eastern Shore, Cecil, so there's a lot of counties represented. So there really is a true state championship. And it's great that our teams get to advance. I mean, you win a county championship, and if it was like high school, you advance to a state level. So the youth football now has that. Another thing I really like about these all-pro championships, they have turned it into something good. In lieu of paying admission, all the fans bring a canned food or Toys for Tots. So they have a canned food drive, a Toys for Tots drive, and you can come to these all-pro games and not have to pay admission fee, but you are asked to bring either a canned food item or something that could be used for Toys for Tots. So I'm glad there's a charitable aspect. And again, Mr. Lataki from All Pro Team Sports deserves a lot of credit for footing the bill for this whole thing. Games get underway this weekend. Saturday is Division II, Sunday is Division I. We're going to have games here in Anne Arundel County, 2 sites, Arundel High and Meade High. And then there's going to be a break for Thanksgiving. Nobody's going to play on Thanksgiving weekend. But the following weekend, which would be the first weekend of December, will be the championships at Cedar Lane Park in Howard County. So good luck to all of our Anne Arundel County teams that are participating in the All-Pro Championships. We hope they advance all the way to the state championship. We're going to show you the schedules of who's playing where, and get out there and support our Anne Arundel County teams as they try to win an All-Pro Championship. Well, it was a beautiful sunny day out in South Bend, Indiana. It was actually pretty warm considering what it's usually like in November in South Bend, Indiana. But it wasn't very warm for the Navy football team. They got shellacked 50-20. Never was in this game. Bob Hoke was talking about the similarity to St. Mary's losing to Pilate 42-0. It was very similar. Nothing went right for Navy, and it kind of started early. They got Notre Dame into a 3rd and 16 situation. Navy has done a fantastic job on 3rd down as far as 3rd down conversion defense this year. They're not letting teams convert 3rd and longs. That's kind of been a key to Brian Newberry's defensive approach. The 3rd down, he has a saying, 3rd down is the most important down. It's the only down. And Ian Book, the quarterback for Notre Dame, scrambles for 15 yards. Notre Dame goes for it on 4th and 1 and gets it, and then scores a touchdown on the first possession. I thought that was a real mental blow to the Navy defense. Then Navy's first possession, Malcolm Perry drives the team right down the field, and you're thinking, okay, Navy's going to be able to match Notre Dame score for score here. We might have a high-scoring game. Navy has first down at the 24-yard line of Notre Dame, and Malcolm Perry is stripped. An option play, Navy defensive end, Khalid Kareem from Notre Dame, traced him down from behind, stripped him, and it's a sudden turnover. And that was a mental blow to the Navy offense. Navy doesn't fumble the ball very often. Malcolm Perry hasn't been fumbling the ball very often, and that became the theme of the day. Notre Dame hitting big plays. Malcolm Perry wound up losing 3 fumbles. Navy lost 4 fumbles in total. It was just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Coach Ked Niumatalolo after the game and Brian Newberry, the defensive coordinator, were very disappointed with the way Navy played because Navy had been on a roll. They'd won 5 games in a row. They're really playing with a lot of confidence, and this game was out of nowhere, really. Notre Dame's good, we know that, but coming into this contest, Notre Dame was ranked 16 and Navy was ranked 21 in the AP poll. I think Notre Dame was 16 and Navy 23 in the college football playoff poll. So you figure, Navy should be able to play with Notre Dame, and I think that's what the coaching staff expected. Notre Dame's favored, but never did anyone expect this lopsided result, and Notre Dame just wiped out Navy. So Navy's got to rebound. They got a huge game this weekend against SMU. This is a big, big game within the American Athletic Conference. Winner will stay alive for the West Division title. Loser really has no shot of winning the West. Both Navy and SMU have lost to Memphis already. All 3 teams are 5-1, but Memphis holds the tiebreaker over both SMU and Navy. So a second loss is really going to make it difficult for either of those teams to be in the American Athletic Conference Championship, whereas a win keeps you on pace with Memphis, and Memphis has a couple tough games coming up. They're playing at South Florida, and then they're home against East Division leader Cincinnati, so Memphis could take another loss here. So this is a really big game, and Navy cannot allow Notre Dame to beat it twice. You got to put it behind and move forward, and they've got to regain their swagger, and that's what concerns me the most with Navy. Losing the way you did in South Bend can linger and maybe make you question yourself, and I'm hoping that both the Navy offense and defense can put that one behind and get back to playing the type of football they've been playing prior to the Notre Dame game. Maryland was off, had a bye week. Looking at the pros, the Redskins, will start with the Washington Redskins. Another disappointing performance, almost a no-show for the Redskins on their home field at FedEx Field in Landover. Toward the end of the game, there was no one there. It literally was no one there except for the Jets fans that had made the trip, or local fans of the Jets. The Jets absolutely demolished the Redskins. Final score 34-17. It wasn't even that close, really. I see a Redskins team that's quit. And I'm reading the comments of the Redskins players, and they sound like a team that's quit. They've given up on the season. They fired Jay Gruden. Bill Callahan is serving as interim coach. He's bringing a different message, a different philosophy. He wants to run the ball, etc. But really, it's the same old Redskins, and it's really sad to watch. And I read a really good column in the Washington Post today. You never would have thought this would happen. The Redskins have always been the toast of the town in D.C. The people love the Redskins. They are so much the pride of the city. With the Super Bowl years and everything, Joe Gibbs there has elevated that pride to another level. And Daniel Snyder, the owner of the Redskins, during his tenure, and we're not going to blame everything on Dan Snyder, but the bottom line is he's the one constant in this theme. They have just gotten worse and worse, and they're now almost a laughingstock within the NFL as far as a franchise, and they've lost the fans. That is hard to believe. The Washington Redskins have lost their fan base, and I'm not sure how they're going to get it back. Obviously, they have to start winning, but what are they going to do to start winning? Everything they've tried, they've changed coaches, changed general managers, nothing works. Let's talk about a team that's really having some success and is something to be proud of for the Baltimore area, the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Mania. Lamar Jackson, he's amazing. He did it again this week, threw 4 touchdown passes, had another one of those video game type runs with just amazing. He is got to be a favorite for the MVP. I mean, the Baltimore fans are chanting MVP, and it's not hype. It is true. He deserves to be in that conversation. He's having an absolutely fantastic season. An utter wipeout of the Texans. The Texans are a division-leading team. Houston Texans are a good team. Deshaun Watson's an outstanding quarterback. They have DeAndre Hopkins, a wide receiver, and the Ravens defense put the clamps on the Texans. I think it was 7 total sacks, 10 pressures. They were in the backfield all day, and the Ravens offense just clicking on all cylinders. Lamar's hitting Mark Andrews for touchdowns. He's got hitting Mark Ingram for touchdowns. Ingram had a good day running the ball. Gus Edwards had a big, long touchdown run. A fantastic performance for the Ravens, who are really starting to look like a true, legit Super Bowl contender. They go out to L.A. for a big game this weekend, and John Harbaugh has been. I saw his locker room speech, and he was telling the guys to, as the season goes along, the focus gets narrower, and you got to stay focused. And I don't think this Ravens team is going to buy into their own hype and all of what's being talked about Super Bowl. They are on a mission. I love the way the Ravens are playing these days, and great win for the Ravens as they continue to be on a major roll. Thank you. That's the end of this week's edition of Gridiron Review. We missed Pete Metter, so I got to have him back in this chair. I'm much more comfortable being the analyst and commenting. Let Pete run the show. So, Pete, need you back next week, buddy. Thanks again. Appreciate you all watching.